Hi, I'm Tina Desiree Berg, and this week on the podcast, we are focusing the spotlight on the LA County Sheriff's Department election, which is coming up this year. I have two special guests with me today. Jayon Carolyn Park is a civil rights litigator who has gone after the LA Sheriff's Department for civil rights violations, and she is also a delegate with the LA County Party. And then we have Brittany Nichols, who is an activist with Ground Game LA. Welcome to you both.
Thank you for having me.
The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department has multiple deputy gangs which encourage members to engage in violent behavior.
Meanwhile, calls for Sheriff Alex Villanueva to resign grow louder.
A continued rise of murders and shootings in LA.
Violent crime is way up and claiming victims here in Los Angeles at a rate we haven't seen in decades.
The LA County Board of Supervisors voted to look at options for removing Sheriff Alex Villanueva.
We've seen this movie before. In a time of crisis, a strong man gets elected, claims to be an outsider, but becomes corrupt and obsessed with power. I worked for a man like this, Sheriff Lee Baca. Under his reign, a group of deputies hid an inmate from the FBI and threatened a federal agent. As assistant sheriff, I spoke truth to power and told Sheriff Baca, don't with the feds. Then I testified against LASD's corruption, and Baca, Tanaka, and 10 deputies went to prison. Today, the corruption's no different. Sheriff Alex Villanueva is the Donald Trump of LA County. Instead of reducing crime, he's eroded public trust, used fear to consolidate power, and tried to rehire ex-deputies that committed domestic violence or excessive force, and who make us good cops look bad. I'm Chief Cecil Rambo, and I'm running to clean up the Sheriff's Department, this time for good. Today, our country faces a reckoning on criminal justice, and Alex Villanueva has been standing in the way of real reform. I've been a Black and Asian man long before I was a cop, so I know what it's like to walk down the street as a person of color. That's why as Chief of Police at LAX, I banned the chokehold so that what happened to George Floyd could never happen under my watch. And as sheriff, I'll stop the corruption, fight crime, address homelessness, and make our criminal justice system more just and fair so that it works for all of us. There's a new sheriff in town. Join me.
It's interesting because Cecil Rambo is somebody who just became a Democrat in June of 2021.
Okay.
He does have many endorsements by establishment electeds and leaders, but there are other candidates who have gotten endorsements from other Democratic clubs, and who do seem to have more, I would say, individual voter support.
Okay.
So hard to tell.
Hard to tell. The reason I bring this up is because I actually interviewed Alex Villanueva when he ran for office for about an hour and 15 minutes. And he campaigned as being very leftist, very reform oriented, supporting Bernie Sanders, and saying he was going to do something about the gangs that are clearly in the LA Sheriff's Department. But now it's come to pass that absolutely none of that was true. So oftentimes I think these guys run campaigns based on what they think is going to win the election versus what they actually have for principles. Brittany, as an activist, where do you see this election going?
Well, I have to say that I think that the party endorsement is pretty important. And I think that a lot of the candidates have caught on to the fact that mimicking leftist or progressive language is very fruitful for them. And so as an activist, I think that it is on us to do our due diligence to really investigate those claims.
Your dog agrees with you.
Yeah, I think they're somewhat outside, unfortunately. The dogs are really acting like cops, just barking at the first thing they see.
Like that is dog speak for ACAB.
But I think it's on us to do our due diligence and to really investigate these claims, because a lot of these people that are running have had high-ranking positions within
That's
their
right.
departments. So people at the departments, they'll give you a pretty honest opinion. They're not used to people asking them what they think of the people that are running. And we saw that with Villanueva, everyone in the department knew that he was a self-obsessed a-hole. And no one spoke to them because, there's sort of this separation that organizers and activists keep from law enforcement because ACAB. But in situations where we have to vote, this isn't a situation where we can pick someone that isn't a cop. Our hands are really tied as far as what is possible to achieve in a race like this. We have to dig in and we have to make sure that we're not putting someone who is going to go back on all of their claims into office. And right now, and historically, there has been this separation, this like purity of we're not going to get involved at all. And that leaves this huge vacuum for people like Villanueva to swoop in, say a couple of keywords, and everyone go, all right, I guess that's what we're doing.
Yeah, no, 100%. And in fact, the last time I had any exchange with Alex was during a press conference in which he was lying through his teeth about a situation. And actually referencing video that I had shot. I don't know if he was realizing that when he was saying this. And so I called him out on this and basically called him a F word. I called him a fucking liar. Yes, this video exists in the world somewhere, but I was just so driven to anger because he started to answer the question, and right off the bat, he was lying about what he was saying. And I had sort of reached my, point of like, I can't listen to this guy lie anymore. So, part of the problem is, you're right, is that we have to elect somebody from law enforcement to be the sheriff. That's part and parcel to the problem. We're going to talk about a bill that's going to change that possibly in a minute. But before we shift gears into that, I want to talk about Rambo for a second, because here's a guy who basically started his campaign by tagging Cerise Castle in a tweet saying, I'm not a gang member. She's a reporter that's obviously done a lot of reporting on LASD gangs. Yet here's a guy that it turns out was there with Paul Tanaka when Baca and Tanaka went down. They both spent time in jail for corruption. They hit an FBI informant, amongst other crimes. They're both part of gangs. Gangs are white supremacy gangs are genuinely a problem in the LA Sheriff's Department. I don't think that's a controversial statement. So why is it that Rambo thinks he can come out now and say, I'm not a gang member, I never was, I'm your guy, I'm going to reform this stuff? Why should anybody believe him?
I mean, they shouldn't, because this is one of those cases where all the proof is there. He was named in multiple lawsuits.
That's right.
That were on a list made by the county of court cases involving deputy gangs. He was named as a defendant in an ACLU lawsuit alleging abuse at the jails. And he openly admits that he knew of the gangs and didn't do anything. So right. He's really counting on just, I think, people being lazy. Everyone is so desperate to get Villanueva out that the shiniest object is someone that they're willing to line up behind, even though all of the proof that he is just as bad, if not worse than Villanueva is there. He's just a sweeter talker. And I think people don't do their research. People trust the party that they belong to. They trust the people that are in leadership. And they're not used to questioning those decisions, even though we see time after time what happens. Yeah. And people just still, it's hard work. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like it's easy all the time, but sometimes it is just a Google away to find out what someone has been up to. And with Rambo, it really is just Google his name with maybe the name deputy, maybe with the term deputy gangs, maybe with the names Baca or Tanaka, and go to those news results, and you will find everything that you could want to know.
That's right. So Eric Strong, who is the other contender, my understanding is he's a little bit more open to reform. Now he's a Long Beach police officer, I believe. Is that correct?
He was formerly in the actually is the only candidate in the race who did something that resulted in a firing of deputy gang members.
Okay.
Trust in the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department is down.
Looks into alleged gangs of deputies inside the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department,
which encourage members to engage in violent behavior and misconduct.
The county sheriff's deputy is suing his own department.
Disturbing video shows deputies taking aggressive actions against an inmate.
but it doesn't have to be this way. It is time we take ownership. My name is Eric Strong. I served in the United States Marine Corps, and for close to 30 years, I've led units across virtually every function of law enforcement. When it comes to protecting our communities, having deputy gangs in our sheriff's department doesn't help. They're destroying the reputation and trust that are sorely needed to effectively communicate and serve. During my time at Internal Affairs and Department Oversight positions, I saw that true accountability is impossible when cronyism and bias run rampant through department leadership. I'm the only candidate that has led investigations into deputy gangs that led to actual terminations. No one else in this race has a real plan to root out deputy gangs. It's time the department was led by someone that understands the impact of bad leadership and bad practices. I grew up in LA County, and I've been profiled and roughed up by police. I even have family members that have been incarcerated and killed by law enforcement. We need systemic change. As sheriff, I will work with the Board of Supervisors to allocate the budget fairly, because I know that other resources besides law enforcement are necessary to solve our problems. I will advocate for other county departments to get the funding and personnel they need to provide the services that prevent crime and keep everyone safe. These are the policies our communities have been asking for. It's time someone listened. Join the movement for a stronger LA. Go to strongforsheriff.com to learn more.
A moral stance to not speak up about who the best candidate in this race is, because we all do not like cops, is actual policy that will make people safe. Of course, there is no safety as long as cops exist, but able to do right now, unchecked, with no accountability, they can do whatever, even in their use of force. Like, we don't know what their use of force policy is, right? Because it's not even public. Why is their use of force policy not public? Like,
nothing
these are the
with them
sorts of things
they're
and changes.
The LA County Sheriff's Department is sorely lacking in transparency. And in fact, you know, like as bad as the LAPD is in this area, they're 100 times better, which is a crazy statement. The LA Sheriff's Department is really, they have very little oversight, very little integrity, and there's a lot of sheriffs out there that do what they want. They're racially motivated. We know this. You know, I've seen them out there in their Trump garb. I've heard them say racist things. I've gone through the Oath Keepers database now, in fact, and I found several sheriff's department in there, some even using their sheriff's department email addresses. So they're not even embarrassed by being associated with right-wing militia. So that's sort of what we're dealing with.
As you're saying, with all of these things, they're having their email addresses attached. It's really normalized within the department. You can see it on their social media. They have accounts sort of dedicated to making fun of the people that they're sworn to protect. They're super racist, they're super homophobic, they're super transphobic, and there is no accountability for the things that they are putting out publicly. And, you know, as much as being a Democrat, really, there's a range. You know, I will say that it is a very loose term at this point. Someone who is a lifelong Democrat like Eric Strong, to me, that's a big contrast to people running like Rambo, and Loon also just became a Democrat. You know, they've realized that since Villanueva won, was able to unseat an incumbent, really a lot because he had the Democrat support. That is the viable route. That's unseated incumbent, is you prove that you're to the left of them.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's sort of the game they're playing. But I think we have to pay attention because obviously, you know, I am sorry to say that I actually did believe a lot of Villanueva's commentary on reform. I thought he did understand the problems. And I know I'm not the only one. And, you know, but the proof is in the pudding. Obviously, you know, these guys are politicians like a lot of politicians, and they want to win elections.
Many of us voted for Villanueva. Many of us believed what he said. And LACDP believed what he said. And so that's actually something that makes me hopeful about people actually doing their research this time, because because we were all duped last time. And, you know, LACDP did get it wrong. And so I think this time, you know, people are really going to want to do their own research. At least I hope so.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope people are paying more attention.